Welcome to World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss, the podcast for busy professionals who want to plan unforgettable trips without the stress. If you're craving adventure, relaxation, or cultural immersion, but feel overwhelmed where to start, this is the show for you. Each week, we dive into travel tips, expert strategies, and actionable advice to help you save time, money, and hassle while helping you design your dream trip. From group getaways to romantic escapes to adventure packed journeys and budget friendly tips, we cover it all. I'm Ross, your host and travel enthusiast, with over a decade of experience balancing a demanding career while also planning trips to over 25 cities in Europe, all over the US, Central America, the Caribbean, and beyond. I've mastered the art of stress free planning, and I'm here to help you do the same. If you love what you hear, don't forget to follow the show, leave us a review, as well as share it with a fellow traveler. I want to make your next adventure the easiest and most memorable yet. Now, on with the show. Welcome to another episode of World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss. I'm your host, Ross. And for this week's episode, I'm excited to have on Caroline Lupini. She is a writer for Forbes Advisor. She's also currently as we're recording at the end of January, 121 countries. And I got the chance to connect with her over LinkedIn. She puts out some great information there. So if you're on LinkedIn, make sure you go connect with her or follow her, and you'll learn a ton like I have. But really excited to have her on the show. Hey, Caroline, how's it going?
Hey, it's good. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for coming on, and I know you've kicked off the year traveling. So would love to just hear a little bit more about what you got going on to kick off the year.
Yeah, so usually I go home for the holidays to visit my family and visit my boyfriend's family. He's from Canada. So we spend a lot of time in cold weather in December and January. So I'm very excited to be in South America now. We started off our international travels for the year in Paraguay because my boyfriend is trying to get residency there for tax purposes. The Canadian tax system is very different than the US tax system, so he can actually exit his tax system. So there are big benefits for him there. And then now we're in Buenos Aires, Argentina. We're spending 5 weeks here, which is about as long as we spend anywhere. I'm really excited to be in one place for a little bit longer than usual.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm jealous of Buenos Aires. We've talked about going there potentially. We usually do an annual snowboarding trip in the winter, and being that I'm getting married at the end of March, got the no-go this year. Didn't want an injury before that, and I know we're talking about maybe in September when it's the winter down there going. But we'll kind of see with all the travel. That's somewhere I've really wanted to go.
Yeah, it's definitely a good spot. And as somebody who has had a skiing injury, I think that's the right call.
Yeah, yeah. This was the 10th annual, and yeah, it was. We're able to get the group of guys together to go to Scottsdale for the waste management tournament, which will
All
be
right.
yeah, which will
That's
be
pretty good.
fun. But I know they're all like itching to get back out there, so I'm
Yeah.
definitely got to get down there at some point. And I know you were um, in Bangkok for a while prior to coming back for the holidays. Is that correct?
Yep, we spent a month in Bangkok. We primarily went there because there was a conference called Extraordinary Travel Festival. It's kind of for the extreme traveler types. I think there were like over 30 people at that conference who had visited every country. And I think at least two or three people have visited every country twice in
Wow.
that group. So it's like a very, very elite group of travelers, like having been to only
Yeah.
121 countries. I'm like a baby in that group. So we decided to stay a little bit longer though, because Bangkok's such an interesting, vibrant city, so much great food, and it was a really good decision.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. I was gonna say, oh, maybe when we're stopping there, that's where we're flying in for our honeymoon right off the bat, and in Bangkok, and we're there for a little bit of time, but yeah, don't think I have the credibility or credentials to go there when if you're going to 121 countries and everyone else has been to every single one, maybe some twice. Yeah, that sounds like a
Yeah,
good group of people to know and have a good time with.
definitely. Definitely.
Very cool. Well, want to learn a little bit more about you. I know when I first heard you, it was on Julia's Geo Breeze podcast, and hearing your interview and hearing your backstory, I thought it was pretty cool. Um, where you went to college, what you got your degree for, and then here you are years later, right? You've gone to 121 countries, traveling full time. So would love to just hear a little bit more about like what inspired you to adopt this lifestyle, and then how do you feel like it's evolved from when you like had that first trip to now?
Yeah, I never would have guessed that this would be my life. I always loved traveling. When I was a kid, we went to Florida. My grandparents lived there, and we went on some cruises. My parents loved that we could go and unpack once and visit a bunch of different places. And especially because cruises have kids clubs and stuff, it was like a really good dynamic for them to be able to have a really good time and for us to have a really good time. And we didn't always have to be together. So I always loved that, but I was like, oh, travel is expensive. I am not going to be able to travel. Like, I'll get to take, maybe one international trip every couple of years or, a couple of domestic trips a year. That's what travel looked like to me. And I didn't have any other frame of reference. Like, that was going to be best case scenario. So when I was in college, I studied engineering and I got my major was a really small group of people. The classes had to be like what they had to be. There was no opportunity to study abroad or you would be a year behind. My parents were like, no, you can't go to college for 5 years, only 4 years. So I was like, okay, well, no studying abroad then. But they helped me pay for a summer trip to Europe. So I did this really awesome month-long bus tour in Europe that was epic. And after I did that trip, I was like, oh my gosh, I love traveling so much. I need to travel more. I actually wrote on Facebook, as you did back in the day, and said, like, life goal, be a travel blogger. It comes up on my memories every once in a while. I always laugh about it. Yeah, I was studying engineering because I was good at math and science, and engineers have good job stability. Engineers make pretty good money. So it's like obviously the logical choice for what I should do with my life. But then after I graduated, I had this job where I was commuting an hour each way, and I was working 50 to 60-hour weeks. The lab I worked in didn't have windows. The office had no windows. Like I'm in the winter, I didn't see the sun. I'm from Michigan. Like it was dark all the time when I was outside. And I was like, oh no, like this is not how I want to spend the next 45 years of my life. What did I get myself into? I actually cried on the way home from work on a regular basis. So eventually I left that job, got a job closer to where I was living, so at least I wasn't commuting like that. And it was only a 6-month contract. So when the contract was up, I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? I decided to go back and get an MBA with an online program and just like take some time to figure it out. I was like, I have lots of miles because I'd gotten into credit cards when I was in university. And so I was like, I'm going to book a trip. I'm going to go to Southeast Asia for 6 weeks. I'll have this program so no one, like no job interviewer is going to be like, oh, what were you doing with your life then? Because the answer was getting my MBA. So I went on this trip to Thailand and Vietnam. I had an amazing time and started blogging a little bit more. I got my first freelance writing gig shortly after I returned from that trip. And while it wasn't enough to know that I could like survive off of that or turn that into a career, it was enough to say, okay, I'm going to give this a little bit more time. I'm going to see like what I can make of this. And I have this MBA that I'm working on to fall back on. So that will at least open some doors for me. It will at least, explain this time away in case I have to. And I just slowly built up more clients over the next few years. And maybe like 2 years or 2.5 years after that, I was like, I actually think this is my career. Like, I don't actually need that MBA anyway. I still finished it. It's close enough at that point. But then I was just like, this is a way better life than I ever thought I would have. I have, like, when I was freelancing full time, I had complete flexibility over my time. I could choose to work with clients or not work with clients. I could work from anywhere I wanted. I could take as much time off as I wanted. So it's epic. But then now, as you mentioned earlier, I'm with Forbes. So back in 2019, I got an email from a hiring manager for a role there for this new like arm of the website they were looking to build out called Forbes Advisor. They needed a credit cards person. And when you get an email from somebody at Forbes, it's pretty good to have a conversation about it. So I did that. I didn't really think I would still be here 5 years later, but in that time we had a pandemic. And now I like my team. I like the content that we work on. And so I'm still here, at least for now, because I still can work remotely. I have a little bit less flexibility over my time than I used to, but there are some other trade-offs with that, like a 401k match and stuff like that. So at least for now, I'm still here, still working for Forbes. But I love travel more than anything, and that's like the non-negotiable in my life. So if I ever had to choose, I would definitely choose travel.
I love it. No, and I wanted you to share that because when I heard it, it inspired me, but it also goes like I want to unpack a couple things there because it goes back to what I think a lot of people have a challenge with is everyone thinks, okay, you go get a 4 year degree. And whatever you get your degree in, that's what you're doing for the next 50 years, right? You take 1 or 2 vacations, travel's expensive. A lot of people, when they do travel, they're either going to an all inclusive or they're going to a cruise. And like what I try to help people with itinerary bosses go do an adventure. Go learn something about yourself because if you go do that, you're really just flying to somewhere in a like an American resort that you can just eat the same buffet and same and relax and drink or not drink. So I think that's one thing. And another is when you start to do things like you just mentioned, you do travel, you take that time and like take that risk, you start to learn a lot of different things. And yeah, I mean, you right after college, you were in like a severance type like lifestyle where you were working, where you were just in a like pretty much in a dark room, just working every day. And you're like, I don't want to do this. Like, I want to actually go travel and do cool things. And that then it's cool just to hear that you took that risk. And then also from there, you learned, oh, okay, I do have credit card rewards. I do have points, right? And then from there, I'm sure that helped you learn a little bit more about that from travel blogging, inserting yourself, connecting with the right people. And then here you are 10 years later visiting 121 countries and like it just shows the compounding effect and a lot of my audience and people always come to me and ask like, "Oh, well, how do you do all of this?" And it's really just get started. It's not like you need to
Mhm.
go book this amazing business class flight across the world your first time. No, just go get started with a rewards program, which whether that's airlines, hotels, and start from there and figure out what you like to do, not just what everything and everyone on social media says to do. It goes back to yourself. So I think that story I wanted you to share that because when I heard it, and also when you're talking about working in Baltimore and the DC area, that's where I'm from. So like that caught my attention. But I thought it was pretty cool that you transitioned from you got the engineering degree, and you hear a lot of these different stories too around whether it's a lawyer. I worked with doctors for 7 years when I started out in the medical device space, and like just a lot of times people are just burnt out, and it's like, well, how many vacations have you taken? Where have you traveled? What have you done? And like when you go to those different places, like you mentioned Thailand, Vietnam, and just many others, you learn a lot of different cultures and you learn a lot of different things, and you're like, wow, there's a lot more important things to life than just work, 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 take off, work, work, work. So I appreciate you sharing that story. It definitely inspired me, and that's why I started reaching out and just commenting and engaging with you on LinkedIn. Other than the right, really good content you put out there. So
Thanks.
yeah,
Yeah, so many good points there. And I'll just add to that as well that like rewards can sometimes feel so complicated. Like there's so much, and especially if you like, I'm not good at doing things halfway. I want to do them all the way. And so I think people from that perspective, it seems really overwhelming because there's a lot. But even just looking for deals, like when I first started traveling, I had some miles and stuff, but at that point in time, especially, I didn't care about flying economy at all. So I would just look on like flight deal and the flight deal and fair deal alert and secret flying is another good one and just be like, oh, I can go to like wherever for this price. Like, yes, sign me up. Like I went to round trip from New York to Mumbai for under $350. I went from I think Chicago to Cairo for $300. Went one of the crazier trips I did was this was actually while I was still working the engineering job, from Chicago to Bahrain and then from Kuwait back to Chicago for like $500. That was the vacation I took the year I was working as an engineer because I only had 10 days of time off per year. PTO plus sick time, wild. Like I
Wow.
never took a sick day, of course, because I was only going to use those days for doing something fun. But so my big trip that I did that year, I went to Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE, and people were like, why? And I was like, well, the flight was $500. There's
Yeah.
got to be something interesting there.
Right.
And it was a really nice trip. I had a really good time. So I think looking for deals, especially for people who are fine to fly in economy, is maybe even better than points and miles because you don't have to worry about availability. And if you're just open to going anywhere, everywhere, there's something everywhere
Yeah.
that's worth seeing. I'm pretty convinced of that, at least so far.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that's like getting started and just being flexible and not saying, I'm going to take this. And that's one misconception that I see with just people that I talk to, whether it's work, personal, over the years. They're like, travel's way too expensive. I can't do it a lot. And it's like, you understand, like we travel for very affordable. And that's, I mean, I think that going back to, I luckily studied abroad in college that got me exposure to staying. And we studied abroad in Ireland for a Maymester and we stayed in hostels, which like was my first exposure. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, six dudes in one hostel. Sure, I'd rather have, my own room, but it is what it is. And then when I started planning trips to Europe, we went with three guys our first time to Oktoberfest, Berlin and Amsterdam, and we stayed in hostels. But it was like,
Mhm.
we can stay in these hostels for 25, $30 a night. Why won't we do that? Luckily, I was traveling for work, so I had some points and rewards built up with Hilton and Marriott. But over the years, I mean, we went to Europe every summer with guys, and a couple of them were teachers. So I was helping plan
Yeah.
those with their budget, and we're like, cool, we'll stay for 30, $40 a night, maybe less in some places in a hostel. And you can find flights, right? If you're tracking them. And you sometimes you have to be flexible, but it's really just getting started there and trying to find deals. No,
Yeah.
so many great points there because I think that's where people get overwhelmed and hung up. And it's like, no, if you just want to travel and try it, like find a cheap, just affordable place, go see how you like it. And then from there you can take a step back and say, what did I
Yeah.
like? What did I not like? What's my style? Are you a city person? Do you just want to go to the beach and chill? Like what? And then that way you can start to form that framework for yourself, not, hey, this is the hot spot on Instagram that an influencer
Right.
is getting you to go there because, hey, they got to pay the bills. They want you to click on links, which nothing wrong with that. But like you need to focus on what's most important to you. And I think you bring up a great point because that's a big challenge that I see when I'm talking to people is, yeah, I'm just too overwhelmed. I'm just gonna do the lazy thing and go to Myrtle Beach or go somewhere where I can,
Yeah.
yeah, where I can drive.
Well, and it's crazy too, just thinking about like the prices in different parts of the world. Like I think for a lot of Americans, going to like kind of Central America, Caribbean, and Europe, those are kind of the hot spots. And Central America, there are for sure some really affordable spots still, but Europe, especially Western Europe, is generally still pretty expensive. That's not to say you can't find a deal, but it's generally pretty expensive. The Caribbean is generally pretty expensive. In Buenos Aires, our Airbnb here, we're paying $45 a night, and it's a nice one-bedroom place. In Paraguay, which no one really goes to Paraguay, it's not a common destination, our apartment there was only $30 a night. And there's actually a category one Marriott and a loft that's only like 5,000 points per night.
Wow.
So if you're willing to kind of look outside of the typical places, you can find really good deals. Versus I'm going to Aspen, where my sister lives in May, the beginning of May, off season, like skiing is closed. It's not good for hiking yet. No one goes to Aspen during this time of year. I could not find a place, even like a room, like the cheapest hotel in town, where you get a room with a shared bathroom was $250 a night. I
Ah,
kid
wow.
you not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've been to Aspen for the X Games. It is not cheap. We
yeah,
found like the best deal probably ever somehow, but everything else, you're looking at Airbnbs for groups and everything skiing. It isn't cheap. But no, it's
yeah,
those off the beaten path destinations and Yeah, I mean, I've done most of Western Europe, but when you get, we went to Portugal, and that's definitely less expensive than a lot of places. But I mean, yeah, the Caribbean, Latin America, I'm really excited for to go to our first time going to Bali and Thailand because I'm like, we've paid for everything over there with points and miles and most of the hotels, but once we're over there, our dollar goes a long way. And I think that's what
Hmm.
a lot of people don't realize is think of the opportunity cost. Yeah, it might take a day to get there, but at the same time, once you're there, your dollar is going significantly further
Yeah.
than in the States.
And even your points can go quite a lot further, especially when it comes to accommodation. Not so much with flights, because the
Mhm,
flights
yeah.
are longer, the award prices are higher. But I know we spent some time chatting about some of the Hyatt properties in Bali,
Mhm.
and there are a bunch. There's only one category one property left, I think, but there are a bunch of category twos and a couple of category threes, and they're really, really nice. Versus like in Florida, you're going to get a category four Hyatt place.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, yeah. The Aliyah and Seminyak and Abood are, I mean, those are amazing. And I'm not as familiar with. I think that's just like a partner brand. I actually heard it. I think you and Julie or someone else she was talking with, and she mentioned. I was like, well, I got to check those out because we have
Yeah.
points to move there. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
the Alila Ubud is one of my favorite places I've ever stayed, so I can't wait for you to stay there.
I've heard. I actually was talking to a guy who created. It's called their app, and it's like it uses AI technology to help like if you're somewhere for like micro groups, but also networking. So if you're say I was going to Buenos Aires and you were there instead of us having to go over LinkedIn, social media, like say you were someone that I hadn't connected with but was trying to, it actually will use technology to show like, hey, Caroline might be a good person. Yeah, it's really cool. But he lived in Bali for a year, so I was talking to him over the week, and he's like, this is what you should do. I stayed there. It's awesome. So like I've had multiple, and I actually had just a recent guest who um, came on, who's the CEO of Inspired Travel Group, who they do like luxury business travel, corporate travel, and she told me that it was great as well. So I was like, all right, I got three
Awesome.
people already singing praises, so
Yeah.
we're ready to go and very excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm super excited for you.
Yeah, I'll definitely I'll have some content and definitely do a podcast walkthrough of a bunch of stuff and a blog write up once it's done. But would love to learn a little bit more. I think I want to focus because you and I could go down a rabbit hole and get very detailed and talk about right transferring this and that and all the fun stuff that goes. But I think I want to take it from a more beginner's perspective, beginner intermediate perspective, and just talk about like some favorite travel credit cards for earning points and miles, and maybe why do those stand out?
Yeah, so I think for somebody who's just looking for like, maybe one heavy hitter card, I would probably recommend the Venture X at this point, Capital One Venture X. Getting to earn 2 points per dollar spent on all of your purchases is super solid. The annual fee is really reasonable for a premium card where you still get access to the airport lounges. And so I think for somebody who likes to travel, that's just like a no-brainer. And then from there, depending on the person, layer in an airline or hotel card or two, depending on their travel habits. So, like somebody who is based in a Delta hub and usually likes to fly Delta and likes to check a bag but doesn't have status, I would probably recommend the Delta Platinum card. But of course, somebody who's not ever flying Delta or doesn't check a bag, then that doesn't give them a lot of benefit. And similar for the hotel cards, if you have a chain that you like to stay with already, I would probably go that route because you get a base level of status if you don't have it already with the card, or help toward earning higher levels of status with many of the hotel cards. Um, for somebody who's not loyal to any hotel chain, I actually think that the One Key Plus card, the Expedia One Key Plus card, is a really good value proposition to just earn good rewards. And just, you book through Expedia, you book through hotels.com, or VRBO as well as part of that set of brands. So I have actually just finished hitting my min spend on that card.
There you go.
Um, so yeah, it depends. That's like always the hard thing. It depends
Yeah.
on a person's travel habits, travel goals, spending patterns. Like somebody who spends a lot at restaurants, the Amex Gold Card that earns 4 points per dollar is a really good option. But if you don't eat out a lot, then maybe that's not where you want to
Hmm.
go. I think the City Strata Premier is a good one for a lot of people as well because it earns 3 points per dollar on groceries, restaurants, and gas. So, like a lot of people have significant spending in
Yeah.
those three categories combined, if not each of those three categories. But yeah, we could go on and on.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of good options in there, though.
Yeah. No, 100%. It just goes back to, right, focusing on what is like looking at it and focusing on what is best for you personally is always the key factor because when you go and I've obviously we've both done so much research, gone down rabbit holes of blogs, YouTube, Instagram, like that's probably what most of our feed is filled with. So you kind of see like, hey, get this one, get that one, but it really comes down to what's most important to your lifestyle if you travel a lot, right? I wish the Capital One Venture X was out when I actually got the just Venture when it in 2017, 2018, which is great because it's two times, right? That was kind of my first outside of using the Barclay World Arrival MasterCard, like back in the day, right out of college when I just wanted a
Mm-hmm.
you know, $0 annual fee. But that was my first taste and got to realize, oh, two times is great on everything. That's still like one of my go-to cards because unless there's different, award bonuses going on, but that's definitely a good one. Either of those. And then there's also, I have one of the banks that we can't mention on here, but I have one of their top higher level ones. And that's definitely a good one that gets you lounge access, right? It gets you 10x the points on Lyft, the Dash Pass, things like that. A lot of different insurance, travel insurance, which is great. And you get three times the points on travel. So that, and then its sister card that has, but
Yeah.
the one thing I don't like is that one, and we'll have links to our website that you can go check these out. But yeah, that one having foreign transaction fees sometimes can be tough. So I think it's nice that the Capital one's great, but the hotel ones are great too. I think one thing I wish that I knew when I first started, when I was traveling a lot for work, was everyone was like, stay in Marriott, stay in Hilton, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes so many, you have to stay so many nights to then be able to hit like free nights. And like luckily I was traveling a lot, but I mean a year's worth of travel, probably staying 75 to 100 nights in hotels, got me like two or three free nights in Berlin for a
Mm-hmm.
Hilton and Munich for a Marriott. But I wish I knew more about when I started Hyatt and, right, being able to transfer points, because
Yeah.
having that small, if you can find a hotel for 5,000 points, 10,000 points, right? And you have that card, I mean, and you also have other cards that can transfer points over, and have that's really, that's helpful. And just an
Yeah.
example,
True.
we're using, like, we're staying in a lot of Hyatts for our honeymoon. We're staying, IHG is where we're doing our hotel block for our wedding, but we're also staying at the Intercontinental in Bangkok, and like being able to get 26 times the points after we hit that, get 5 free nights from one of the signups, as well as, right, having Hyatt that gets that, like being able to do those, we're looking at like 7, 8 free nights this year just by strategically prioritizing those, and also knowing that like that's
Mm-hmm.
where we like to stay. And my fiance travels a lot for work, so I'm like, hey, stay in Hyatt's because the next couple
Yeah.
months you can double on your points. So just like knowing that, and knowing like where do you want to stay, what do you have coming up this year, and also like you mentioned, if it's a hub for an airline, like Atlanta's Delta, we're American. So I have the Barclay Red World Aviator Arrival
Mm-hmm.
MasterCard. So like that's,
Yeah.
but knowing that it, but it also just again comes back to what you like, what do you have coming up, and starting small, because once you do one, then like Caroline said, you're gonna want to you're like, wow, I can do this for free or minimal spend.
Yeah.
And then that's when it gets fun and you start to go down a rabbit hole. And then you have experts like herself, you have resources and kind of an expert like myself. So that's what I would say from my
Yeah.
point of view.
Another interesting thing I think about the hotel credit cards is it's actually pretty easy to get status with a bunch of different hotel chains just through or primarily through credit cards. Like I, even traveling full time, I don't stay enough at hotels to get status everywhere. But because
Mhm.
I stay like pretty often at all of the hotel chains over the course of the year, because I want the right location, I want the right price. So I'm not really that loyal. I love that like through the Hilton Aspire card, you get top tier Hilton Diamond status just for being a card holder, which gets you a food and beverage benefit at most Hilton hotels around the world. Uh, with the Marriott Bonvoy Brilliant card, which is the premium Marriott card, you get platinum status, which isn't top tier, but it still gets you breakfast at most Marriott properties around the world. And then I love Hyatt status the most. I qualify for Hyatt status, but it's a bit stressful, like trying to get 60 nights per year. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get these from the credit card, these from spending on the credit card, and then we have to strategically plan around like where is there a good price Hyatt? Like we're going to Brazil after this, and there's a Hyatt place for $80 a night, like 4 hours outside of Rio in a town that no one really goes to, but we need to catch up on work before my parents come down and travel with us for a week and a half. So we are like, yeah, okay, we can go to this town where there's not like that much else to do just to stay at this Hyatt place that's really cheap so I can get 11 nights towards status for the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably most people aren't going to want to jump through those hoops.
Yeah, no, and that's where we can go down an absolute rabbit hole. And I think
Yeah.
for people who are newer or say for my audience is busy professionals, right, who want to figure out how do I save time, how do I save money, right? I want kind of an easy button. I think if you're traveling for work, and a lot of times if you're working for a bigger corporation, they'll give you a credit card and you're using that. But a lot of smaller, sometimes startups, they say, hey, we just use an expense software, you use your own credit card. So thinking of if you are staying in hotels, right? If there is a Marriott, if there is a Hilton, if there is a Hyatt, right? Like having one, getting started with one, and as you get better, maybe more.
Hmm.
But then focusing on that and using that card when you stay there because you're going to maximize your points
Definitely.
with those rewards. And then if you're booking flights, using kind of you can use either the Capital One, others, or even that flight one. But that way, you're just really maximizing points and you're getting started. And then again,
Yeah.
like once you get started, that's the biggest thing. Then you'll start to learn the fun stuff that all comes with it. And I want to ask you, Caroline, because I think one thing that people who have maybe one, two, sometimes are getting to that third card. Their first questions to me is like, Ross, this is all great, but like, how do I organize this? And for me, I'm just thinking, well, my wheels are always turning and like I'm gonna be able to go boom, boom, boom and like have organization skills and strategies. But for others, like are there specific apps or anything out there that are good tools for people?
Yeah. So I got started in this whole world well before there were all of the tools that we have now. So I have a spreadsheet and it works for me. So that's my bread and butter. It's like it hasn't been worth it to switch to something else. But I do think there are a few tools available now that are pretty much must-haves, some of which I do use, just not to track my credit cards. So, AwardWallet is one that's for tracking like all of your different loyalty accounts. And if you pay for their premium subscription, which I think costs like $50 a year, they will actually monitor the expiration on all of your points and miles accounts so that you don't have to, you have to still take action if your miles are going to expire, but they're not going to accidentally expire when you don't realize that's going to happen. That's saved me a couple of times, and I think that's really key, especially as you start signing up for more programs like over the course of your journey within the points and miles space.
I
Um,
do want to ask what
yeah.
like what are there specific programs just for the audience because they're probably thinking, well, this is great. I'm going to go sign up for these, but how do I know, right? Are there specific programs, airlines, hotels, anything else that points and miles do expire?
Yeah, so within the bank programs, not really. As long as you keep your card open and your account is in good standing, your bank points are good. So if you have a card with American Express or Capital One, you're good there. But with the airlines and hotels specifically, so Delta, American, Hyatt, those are the types of points that you need to be aware of. Some don't expire, like Delta points do not expire, and some programs have really annoying expiration policies, like KLM Air France is one, where I believe it's the points expire after 18 months, but you can't just like transfer points to extend the expiration. You actually have to fly with KLM Air France or one of their partners. So I almost let some Air France miles expire years ago. I was traveling in Russia and I'd taken an Aeroflot flight that was super short and it was like, I don't know, $30. And I was like, whatever, it's not even worth dealing with crediting that flight somewhere because it's practically no miles. And then it's so lucky that that was what I had thought about that flight because I didn't know this quirk about those miles expiring and that I needed a flight to credit. And because I had this uncredited flight, I was able to credit it after my miles expired, but retroactively. So they restored my miles and it was like 60,000 miles. It was a lot
Wow.
of miles. So,
That's a nice
um,
business class seat.
yeah, yeah. So that's like quirky. A lot of programs, you just have to have some kind of activity in your account within sometimes it's 18 months, sometimes 24 months, sometimes 36 months. So for most programs, transferring miles from a partner will work. Buying miles will work. Going through a shopping portal will work generally. So that's easy if you know your miles are going to expire, like, oh, I'll just transfer some from Amex. There are a handful of programs that are quirky. Singapore is another one that's quirky. Your miles just expire after, I think it's 36 months. There's nothing you can do about it. You can pay to extend them once. I just also had to do that. So don't be like me.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, AwardWallet is a really good, I think must use software, even if you don't pay for the premium subscription, just to be able to keep track of all of your account numbers and your passwords in one place. I use that every single week. Um, for keeping track of credit cards, I like Travel Freely. You can put all of the cards you have in there. You can, when you apply for a new card, you can say when you applied, they'll send you annual fee reminders, which is really useful. So you know when you might have to make a retention call or you might want to cancel a card. And they also help you keep track of some super useful numbers, like how many cards you've applied for within the past 24 months. Um, and what else? Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I
Oh,
know you.
they help you keep track of sign up towards spending, not spending, but when the period to earn a sign up bonus is going to end. So that's super helpful too for when you're getting new cards.
And that can be very helpful. I know you connected me, Zach, and the Travel Freely team. So shout out to them and thank you for doing that. But just for a personal use case, right? Like when that's very important because sometimes if you have opened up a couple different cards and you're trying to hit those to get the bonus, sometimes you're like, when is that? And how much do we have to do left? And like, for example, if you're strategically like we are planning a wedding and you're like, all right, we got to put it on this one for that one and we have to hit this. It even if you're super organized, like for us, we're checking in because yeah, we're bumping up against that. And it's like, all right, we have a couple little expenses we
Yeah.
can hit that and we have this limit. So it can get complicated, but that's why I wanted to ask Caroline, and we got connected some of those tools. I mean, I want to bring the audience because those are real life challenges that they have simple tools to get started. And then once you start to have multiple cards like we do, you have a nice organizational process in place. You can keep your
Hmm.
own, but those are tools that have come out where people had those challenges. And that's exactly why they created the apps and
Yeah.
tools available.
Yeah. And I think also there's like double checking in this space is a good idea. Like you said, you're when all your planning and like what card and when is that bonus? When do I have to earn it by? I think even with the tools, it's still important to double check things. Like if AwardWallet says I have miles expiring, I'm going to go log in and double check it. And like even though I use travel freely, like 90% of the time, I still I use Todoist just as like my normal to-do list app, and I have a task with subtasks, a min spend task with subtasks of like all the cards I've had over the year. And when I apply for a card, I try to put in all of the details that are helpful. But sometimes I forget to put in like what I need to actually spend. So I'd gotten an Alaska Airlines business card a few months ago. The min spend period is ending on February 12th. I know that date for sure because I put in that helpful information, but I forgot to put in how much I need to spend, and I don't know if it's 3,000 or 4,000. I thought it was 3,000, but then I looked and the current offer is for 4,000, so maybe it's 4,000. But either way, I'm just going to call Bank of America because it would suck to miss out on that
Yeah.
many points. Because I thought the number was wrong, and I could also just spend the extra 1,000, but I would also rather put that 1,000 on a card that would
Hmm.
be more beneficial if I don't need to put it on that card to hit them and spend. Um, so yeah, and even if you take like even if you're the most organized person in the world and you take all the notes, double checking is a good idea. Like if a bonus was supposed to post, make sure it actually posted. Sometimes
Hmm.
there are problems, or sometimes I've had one time where the miles posted, but it was lower than the amount that I was supposed to earn. And I had to contact, it was Barclays in that case. I had to contact them and I kind of had to fight with them to get what I thought
Yeah.
like what I had applied for. And so some people, they're so detailed, they'll take screenshots of the offer when they apply and everything.
Smart.
I'm pretty organized, but I'm not that organized. I'm not quite that detailed, but I at least know what it's supposed to be, and then I follow through.
Yeah. No,
So I
that's
think
smart.
that's really, really key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, and it's finding out, what tools work for you, what processes work for you. And that's, I think the nice thing is now I pay for ChatGPT Teams and just they have new projects features that just make it so much simpler to organize everything. You just talk when you're walking, right? Advanced voice mode, just be like, hey, I need you to do this. Can you outline these things for me? And then I use ClickUp as my project management software and just have tabs where it just makes it, there's so many tools now that make it easier. But
Yeah.
I think we both started out where it's like, all right, we got Google Docs, spreadsheets, right? We're doing kind of
Yeah.
everything manually where we're used to that. And so this just makes it a lot simpler. But I think the good thing is it makes you make sure that you have that type of backup strategy in place and you're very thorough with it.
Yeah. And I have one final tool that I want to share that I think is so useful for once you've already earned miles and you're ready to start using them. Because especially if you have transferable points through one of the bank programs, you have just so many options of how you can use your miles. And definitely as a beginner, but really always. Like you're not going to know everything off the top of your head. You're not going to have all of the award charts memorized. Some airlines don't even use award charts anymore, and it's more dynamic pricing. And you want to get the best deal once you've earned your miles, right? So, like, don't try to know everything. Um, I start all of my award searches now with PointsYeah.com because I can type in where I want to fly from, where I want to fly to, and you can search with the free version, I believe 3 days at a time. But if you upgrade to the premium version, you can search a week at a time. So if you're a more flexible traveler, you don't have to do all of these individual searches on, like British Airways and United and Singapore and like wherever. You don't have to search everything individually. And again, it's not perfect. It's going to miss things. It might show you some availability that's not actually there. You're still going to have to go double check it before you transfer your points to make sure what you want to book is actually going to be possible to book. But I think it's such a time saver, like such a time saver compared to what we used to have to work with, like even, 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, no, those are three good ones. There's a lot of different ones, and I like all three of those, and personally use the first two. So I need to start using points dot. Yeah. a little bit
Yeah,
more if
just
you'd like.
yeah, PointsYeah.com. And there are some competitors to AwardLogic and Point.me. They're both good. They all have different pros and cons. And PointsYeah, because of the flexible search capability, is my favorite because I'm a pretty flexible
Yeah.
traveler. Like I never pretty much have to fly somewhere on a specific day. So I
Yeah.
like being able to search a whole week at a time. PointMe, I think you have to search a day at a time, and but you can search yeah, some of them you can search more classes of service together, and some of them you can search more dates. Anyway, there are trade-offs for each one. You can try them all, find the one that works for you. My personal favorite at the moment is Points, yeah, but there are so many tools coming out all the time now too. Like I have a list of some tools I haven't even tested yet
Yeah.
because there are so many now, whereas 5 years ago there were just none.
Yeah. Everyone saw the pain point and was like, well, this is my pain point, so I'm gonna go
Yeah.
ahead and create it. No, it's definitely been helpful for me in the past couple years, just diving into all the different ones, and but also reminding myself like don't try to use 15. Just figure out
Yeah.
what works best for you, what works best with your schedule, and how are you going to maximize your points, miles, traveling with cash. And I think that's something too I wanted to touch on. You did touch on it a little bit, but if there's anything else specific just around, combining points, miles, and sometimes cash, like to secure the best flights or accommodations. I know you touched on what you're doing when you're in Brazil for a smaller amount of points, staying outside of Rio, also, Airbnb in Buenos Aires as well as Paraguay. But if there's anything else specific, like when sometimes you combine those, would be great to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah, there are so many strategies. I think for flights, one thing I like to do, and again, this is from the perspective of a more flexible traveler, I know that the biggest price I'm going to pay typically in a year are those flights between continents. So we usually fly between continents like 3 to 5 times per year, depending on the year. But I don't we have a lot of flexibility. So when I know we want to be flying from Europe or from the US to Europe in the middle of June, I'm going to start looking for flights from anywhere in the US to anywhere in Europe in the middle of June. And then depending on how flexible we are, we don't have to necessarily fly from where we are in the US to where we need to go in Europe because we can piece together an itinerary that will make it cost a lot less. Perhaps the best case I have of this is from a few years back, but I needed to fly from Europe to Asia. And I didn't have so much flexibility for when I wanted to leave Europe, but I had like 2 weeks of flexibility for when I arrived in Asia. And I found a business class flight from Milan to Jakarta for, I think, $400 one way.
Wow.
So I think I wasn't in Italy, but I was somewhere nearby. I was in that general region of Italy, of Europe. Getting to Italy was very easy for the outbound flight. And I ultimately needed to be in Cambodia. So Jakarta was not, Indonesia is not Cambodia. I still had to figure out how to get to Cambodia. But even to fly an economy flight between Europe and Asia is $400 for a one way is a really good deal. So that I got to fly business class for that same price. And then flying within Asia is cheap. So I picked up another, quick little flight for probably under $100 to get to my final destination. And you can use that similar strategy combining points and cash. So sometimes you might be able to find your long haul flight with points in business, but then you can't get to your final destination with those same points or with points at all. So you can book that long haul flight if you have enough time and flexibility in your schedule with points. Stay a day or two wherever you land. Maybe it's an interesting place, and then book a cash flight onward to your final destination. And maybe that's a better deal than trying to book it all in the
Hmm.
same ticket with either cash or with points, or yeah, vice versa. Like maybe you find a good cash flight out of New York, but you live in Miami, but maybe you can fly for a cheap flight price from Miami to New York, or you can use miles to fly from Miami to New York and then pick up that cheap cash ticket out of New York.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great combination.
Yeah, I think it's just being flexible. And that those are great points, right? It's not always just, okay, I need to book, get to this one destination using points. If I have a little bit of flexibility, I can pay with cash or I can pay with points and just strategically
Mhm.
outline it. And like you mentioned earlier, it's like just getting started and figuring out what, starting out going on maybe one of those more affordable trips just to get your feet wet or getting a card and then using that to then kind of see, hey, how do I do this? What are the right things to do? I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing is most people just get analysis paralysis. They're like, there's too much to do. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
not do it. But I think once you kind of break it down like that, and there's so many different ways to do it, but they're very simple. It
Yeah.
makes it easy.
Yeah. And I think with hotels, the best advice for me is just to like don't be loyal and don't get caught up with all of the big brands.
Yeah,
Usually you're going to pay a premium. And
yeah,
so, I mean, I say that as somebody who cares about maintaining Hyatt globalist status, but like in Buenos Aires, all of the chain hotels here are pretty expensive. Like you're going to be paying for sure over $100 a night, and there are some that are plus, plus, plus. You can book a like decent four-star hotel here for 35, $40 if you
yeah,
don't care. And so that's where I think the one key plus card and Expedia and hotels.com and Airbnb and VRBO all come in because usually usually there's a better deal. And so that's, I think, important to think about when you're thinking about what your points are worth. If you're comparing the value you're getting from your points to what you would have otherwise spent, like booking whatever you would have paid for in cash, versus if you compare it to like what that exact thing that you would have that you did book would have cost. And I that also comes through when you're talking about flight and value of airline miles too. Like so many people are like, "Oh, I booked this $20,000 first class flight. So I got 20 cents per point in value for
yeah,
my miles." But no one who cares about points and miles is probably going to be actually booking a $20,000 first class flight.
yeah,
Like they might be booking a $2,500 business class flight or an $800 economy class flight. So when you're talking about the value, I think, it's nice to be able to make to like give it that wow factor. Like, oh my gosh, look how much value I'm getting for the point.
yeah,
But if it's not what you would have really otherwise spent, then it's not really the value that you're
yeah.
getting for the point for yourself personally.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just focusing on what do you want to do? And like, and I can tell you probably outside of like 1% of people who actually are in the points and miles and just super travel niche, like the people who you went to Bangkok with who know everything and anything, right? Like no one, a lot of people don't even know what that may mean. So I think it's just like figuring out where do you want to go in 2025 and 2026 and not holding on to them and saying like, oh, well, this, I want to get the best deal because it might not be there. It's like, where do you want to
Yeah.
go? Using them, getting that experience. And then over time,
Yeah.
you're going to learn, how to use them a little bit better. But no, those are great points. And yeah, I think from a stay perspective, I love the one key card you mentioned because you do have that flexibility. And sometimes in different areas of the world, there are going to be boutique hotels. The chains are going to
Mhm.
be more expensive. If you're going with a group, Airbnb, Verbo is going to be great, right? I think that's where
Yeah.
we've always stayed for group trips. But then if you're just going with your significant other and you have those points racked up, you can use those and you can do a kind of accommodation split where you do some on those and some in that. It just depends on also your travel type. If you're wanting to
Yeah.
stay in an Airbnb like you are, or if you're wanting to stay in a
Right.
hotel. So no, all really good points. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you diving into that from a unique stay, going to 121 countries, right? You've been to a lot of really cool places. So I'd love to hear, are there maybe two to three that you would say you're like, these are places I wouldn't have imagined would be this great, and they are kind of off the beaten path that they aren't all over Instagram that people might not be thinking about?
Mhm.
I think let's start there would be good.
Okay. Well, one favorite spot I stayed that I would say it's a little bit all over Instagram, but it's still one of the most unique experiences I've had in terms of accommodation, like points-based accommodation anyway, was Kalala Island in Nicaragua. When I booked it, it was still Small Luxury Hotels of the World was partnered with Hyatt. But now Small Luxury of the Hotels of the World is partnered with Hilton. So it's this private island resort with I think there are 5 rooms in total. It's all inclusive, so you fly from Managua to a smaller airport on the Caribbean side of Nicaragua, and then you take a boat ride to get to this island. This is all included in your stay. All of the food is included, including like fresh lobster with every meal. Drinks are included, and yeah, it's just a super, super intimate small island. Um, I think the cash rates at this hotel are over $3,000 a night, so definitely not something I would have splurged on if I hadn't had the points. Um, yeah, super awesome experience. I think a lot of people often debate for that hotel specifically how long should I stay? It's a 3 night minimum. I stayed 4 nights and I didn't feel like 4 nights was enough time because they do all kinds of excursions during the day too.
Mhm.
And because we were only staying for 4 nights, I was like, oh, I really don't actually want to leave the
Yeah.
island because it's so cool here. And so I think if I'd stayed 5 or 6 nights, then I would have like wanted to go explore some of the surrounding area a little bit more. So I would personally say stay a little bit longer. Um, that's definitely a top spot. One place I'm really looking, oh, I don't know. This is a hard
I know.
question.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stump you. I said break it down
Um,
2 to 3 out of 121.
yeah,
That
there
is
are
hard.
just so many. I don't know though. I would say I really honestly love the more boutique experiences the most. Like I don't really want to feel like I'm staying at a hotel. So some of my best memories of places I've stayed are Airbnbs. Like I was in Fez, Morocco, last year, and we rented a Riyadh, and it was just my boyfriend, my mom, and I, and it had 5 bedrooms, and it was crazy. It was so beautiful. We had 2 balconies. It was like 5 stories tall. It was this crazy, crazy place for especially for the three of us, and it was like $120 a night. So like sometimes I feel like the value is just so much better outside of the points and miles space when it comes to hotels and accommodation that even though I've enjoyed some of my stays and sometimes it's definitely the best deal I still am going to keep earning Hyatt status for the foreseeable
Yeah.
future. So I'm not fully converted obviously, but when I think off the top of my head of some of the coolest places I've stayed, it's definitely not hotels.
I agree. I mean, yeah, I mean, definitely hotels are nice from a getting points and miles and staying pretty much for free, but Airbnbs, I mean, if you're going with a group, even if it's 4 people, right? Like just having everyone right there to create those memories. And
Hmm.
also you're going to get those balconies, right? That are overlooking just everything. The one that for
Hmm.
me that comes to mind is when we went to Dubrovnik, Croatia with 7 of us, and like we had same thing. You walked out and it just overlooked everything, the entire old
Yeah.
town. You're just like, I feel like I'm in Game of Thrones right now. And it's just you wake up to that every morning. And I mean those are and there's a couple others too, but all of those were Airbnbs or VRBOs
Yeah.
and but no,
I did think of another really good one though while you were talking. It was another SLH property called Canave Suites in Ia on Santorini.
okay.
And so again, used to be a partner with Hyatt. That's what when I booked it, now partner with Hilton. I stayed there with my mom. I feel like my mom gets really lucky. She's in all of my stories of the best
I
places I've stayed. Um, we got upgraded to an epic, we just booked the basic room. We got upgraded to this epic, like 2 story room. I mean, it wasn't just a room, it was a whole like apartment basically, where she got her own bedroom and I got my own bedroom. And then we had basically a full-size pool out on our patio. And this was Santorini is not cheap. So
No.
it was not cheap with points. I believe I paid 40,000 Hyatt points per night, and I value my Hyatt points at about 2 cents each. So like $800 a night worth of points. It was not cheap, but Santorini is not cheap anyway. So I'm sure we could have found a nice place to stay for less than $800 a night, but we might not have been able to find a nice place to stay for less than $400 a night. And definitely that hotel was a really incredible experience.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we went to Santorini this past September and it's definitely not cheap, but we found a good Airbnb that was great. I mean, great views, but it wasn't in IA and I know IA is more expensive and if you can
Yeah.
stay, we were but it goes back to like a prime example of could we have used points there? Yes. But for us, we were like, we want to go all out for our honeymoon and right, use them for
Yeah.
our flights to get to and from because that's a full day of travel. And right, staying in some of the Hyatts that we mentioned earlier, like that was important. So being able to use
Yeah.
just different cards to do that, we decided we'll pay in cash for Greece and stay in different Airbnbs because, and so those were some of the coolest places that you stay. So no,
Yeah.
I
And it's
agree.
such a different experience too. Like you get kind of a more local experience. And I
Hmm.
know we talked about hotel status a while back and I made a lot of emphasis on like the food and beverage credit and breakfast. But that can be such a double-edged sword too. I stayed at the Hyatt Regency in Merida, Mexico a few years ago because I was trying to requalify for Hyatt status. There are a lot of trends here. And it was very affordable on a cash rate. And the breakfast was amazing. Like it's
Yeah.
one of the best hotel breakfasts I've ever had. It went until noon. I'm not a morning person, so it was amazing to not have to get up early for breakfast because that's a thing at some places if you're not a morning person. But we didn't go out and eat
Hmm.
in Merida because we had breakfast included. It was a good breakfast. I had globalist status though, so we also had access to the Regency Club. So we ate most of our dinners in the Regency Club, and
Hmm.
there's so much good food in Mexico. So yeah, it's such a double-edged sword sometimes staying at an Airbnb if you're really into the food scene and you're
Yeah.
getting all this free food at your hotel, and then you're not exploring the real food in
Yeah.
the place
Yeah.
you're staying. So that's another reason I think Airbnbs can be great. And then also Airbnbs, you have a kitchen, so it's sometimes
Hmm.
nice to be able to just cook breakfast, like boil some eggs, fry some eggs at home, and not have to go out for every meal too. So a
Exactly. And
lot of my travels are focused around food.
I same, honestly. Like I think when we were younger, it was like, okay, where can we go since we would travel with a bigger group of guys? It's like, where can we go that's going to be the most fun, most nightlife, right? We want to get have fun there, but and also has good food. Now we're like, all right, we're so excited for the food, right? When we went to Greece,
Yeah.
we ate, I think probably in 11 days, over 20, 25 Greek salads. Like we were like, we got to try that every meal. We got to
That's
do
awesome.
this. We got to like everywhere. And that's one thing. I'll try anything. So like, I always ask like, I look at the menu and I go, what is the most odd thing on here? And like, I'm not going to eat that in the States at home. So I might as well try it. If it's not good, whatever, I tried it. But it's like doing those
Yeah.
things and getting that local feel. And when you do too, if you go out a bunch of different places, you can try sometimes some of the same things and just try it at different places that have a different spin on it. And yeah, no, I agree. That's one of our favorite things to do. Since we're on the topic of food, is there I guess I'll just stick with the 2 to 3 places, but any specific food destinations that have been your favorites?
Yeah, so I mean I love food. I eat everything also. I don't get weirded out by trying even like the weirdest things. Top food destinations, I'd say number one pretty much is Japan. I think there's so much there. The quality is top notch across the board. Like you can go into a 7-Eleven and get an amazing meal, or you can go to like there are so many Michelin starred restaurants and it's amazing quality across the whole spectrum. Um, I am Italian. Like my grandparents are, I came from Italy, so there's a lot of Italian food in my family, and I definitely love that part of my heritage. So I think Italy is amazing. I do sometimes get a little bit of carb overload if
Yeah.
I eat too much Italian food, like day after day after day, but I love Italian food. And third, I would actually say Trinidad.
Okay.
in the Caribbean is one of my favorite food spots because they have a really interesting mix of cultures there. A lot of people immigrated from various parts of the world, including like Europe and Africa and Asia. So they have all of those like individual like cuisines, but they also have some really interesting fusion, like Trini cuisine that's like Indian Chinese fusion and stuff like that that is I think really, really special. And I haven't spent a ton of time there, but that's a food destination that I've been really dying to go back to.
Okay. I could have guessed the first two. Those are I've heard great things. The third, that's good to know. I'll have to
Yeah.
check that out. Very cool. Yeah, I
Yeah, Trinidad is one of my favorite countries. I think it's super underrated and not really like your typical Caribbean destination. Tobago, the smaller island that's part of the same country, is much more kind of typical Caribbean, white sand beaches,
mhm.
sort of similar vibes as like I feel like Americans are usually going for in the Caribbean. But Trinidad, I think is just such a cool spot.
It's good to know. Cost wise, is it pretty affordable?
Yeah, I would say so. I was there in 2018 or 2019, so things could have changed since
Hmm.
then, but I felt like it was definitely it's I would say it's definitely more affordable than like you would consider the more traditional Caribbean islands like, Aruba and St. Lucia,
Yeah.
St. Thomas, like kind of the more typical hotspots to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Yeah, we've been to Turks and Caicos twice, both on my birthday, and that's like it's a quick 2 hour flight from Charlotte. You can get it for like 15 to 20,000 American points, and it's just
Nice.
easy. But yeah, I'm always looking for other places. If for quick trips, I feel like we like when we go there, it's more of a 4 day trip. We like to do our
Yeah.
longer trips in other places that we just mentioned. And we probably have a Italian destination wedding in 2026, and our next place that we really want to go is Japan. So I'm glad you answered
Okay.
both those for food. That makes it that cements
Yeah.
that. But no,
Yeah, you
I
won't be disappointed for sure.
good good. I as it gets closer, I'll have to ask you more about some of your favorite places in those
Definitely.
countries. But I appreciate you coming on, Caroline. This has been extremely helpful. Just walking listeners through, right, getting started, different strategies, different places, right, sharing different stories too. I thought that was really helpful. But for people who want to follow you, learn a little bit more, what else can they do? What else do you have going on?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram at caroline.lupini. I do a little bit of posting on TikTok too, just at Caroline Lupini. But I have lots of ideas of things that I want to work on this year, so I might be like I've had the idea of relaunching my newsletter, so that might be happening. But I would say anyone who's interested in following along with my travels or learning whatever I'm going to get up to next, the best place to do that at this point in time would be Instagram.
Okay, cool. One other question, last question that I like to ask people: what are you most excited for 2025?
Ooh, that's so hard. I'm excited about a lot of things. I would say I'm of the things that I'm like most certain are going to happen this year, like there are some things I'm excited about that aren't quite set in stone yet. So of the things that I'm most certain of, I'm going to Italy for a month and I'll be spending all the time in the north.
Okay.
And I just got I have the Italian heritage, and so we've been for the past 4 years going through the process of claiming our Italian citizenship through our ancestry, because Italy does this like if you have a bloodline, if you can prove the bloodline, you're Italian, even
Yeah.
if you've had many like potentially many generations born outside of Italy. So because of the specifics of my case, we had to have a judicial proceeding with the Italian government, which we won back in September of last year. So all of the paperwork is still processing, but I'm hoping that by this summer I'll actually have my Italian passport. But either way, when I go to Italy, like officially already now I'm Italian, even though I don't have the Italian passport yet. So it'll be the first time I get to go to Italy as an Italian and spend a month there. And I'm actually going to the town where my great grandmother, who we claimed the citizenship, is from for a couple of nights. And yeah, I have like goosebumps talking about it. It's going to be really amazing.
That's cool. That's why I like asking that question because it's always right. That's something that's personal that and for 4 years that's very
Yeah, it was not supposed to take that long. The initial quote was like a year and a half to 2 years. So actually we're at 4.5 years now. So it's been a process.
I can imagine. Well, congrats. That's really
Yeah,
exciting.
thank you.
I'm excited to follow along and see those trips and everything exciting that you have going along. And again, I really appreciate you coming on. This was helpful for me to learn, but also for my audience to learn. If you're new here, listening, make sure to give us a follow. That way you don't miss any upcoming episodes that we have coming out. We launch one every week with different amazing guests like Caroline, as well as each Tuesday or every other Tuesday, I have solo series that I do step by step walkthroughs of different topics, whether it's location, whether it's points and miles, whether it's just strategies of to getting started. So make sure you give us a follow, subscribe. If you think we deserve a 5-star review, go ahead and give us one. That way we can reach more people as well as share with a friend or family member. I think that helps us grow the show and helps more people start traveling. So until next week, appreciate everyone tuning in. And again, Caroline, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.